Hello friends, I have another cute bag to share with you today. This is my string bag number 2, and I showed you in my last video where I had the multicolor string bag. I showed you how I constructed the strip units. Basically I just took a strip of batting and then sewed my strings going horizontally across that batting, and then sort of a stitch and flip method. And I will leave a link to that video in the description box so that you can go back and watch that if you would like to. Now I cut my batting strips for this bag at 4 inches wide, and then after I trimmed them, I believe I trimmed them down to 3.5 inches. So there'll be a little bit more narrow strip than in the first bag I made. And so I will have a total of 12 strip units, 6 on the front and 6 on the back, because they are a little bit more narrow, and I also used a more narrow piece in between the blocks. Now of course, if you make a bag like this, you can use whatever size strips you have for your batting, and you can also use whatever width of strings you have. Some of mine are wider and some are more narrow, and I think that just adds to the character. I focused on my green strips this time. Basically anything that had green as a major color, lights and darks and mediums. The only thing I kind of stayed away from was the real bright greens, like for Christmas. I wasn't really wanting those in there, and I did use up most of my green and greenish strings, so I was real happy about that. So I'm showing you here how I connected my strip units together. I cut 1-inch strips, and I sewed them at a 1/4 inch seam on one side, and then on the other side where I connected it to another strip. So it forms a more narrow connecting strip. Okay, I will just finish sewing the strips on all of those units, and then we'll go to the next section. Now the reason that I chose a 1-inch wide connecting strip is because I didn't want to have to put the little filler strip of batting in there like I did on the first one, the first bag. So you may be thinking, well, that really looks too narrow to even work, but I'm going to show you how that works, and then I don't have to use the filler strip. here in just a little bit. I know it seems a little bit difficult to understand how this is going to work, because when I saw how narrow those strips were, I doubted myself as to whether or not it would actually work, but it did. So I'm just sewing my 1/4 of an inch seam there. And of course I am going to chain stitch all of that, and then I'll show you how it all comes together. And that last little press over the top of that really makes those little strips, connecting strips, lay down and produces a nice flat surface. Okay, I think this is where I decided that I needed, yes, I had 8 strip units here, and I decided that I needed 12. So I've gone back and made those other 4 units. So now I'll have to connect those, and then this is going to be a nice big bag. I had used most of my green, so I had to really go looking. You saw a few strips there, a few strings that were a little bit more colorful with some other colors in them, but they all had green. Okay, I have those other 4 strip units stitched on. Now I'm just comparing the size, what the size would be like to the last one that I made. And it looks like it's going to be a little bit bigger, a little bit taller and a little bit wider. And I'm thinking about boxing those corners. Just giving myself a little reminder here and there. Okay, so here is the fabric that I cut those 1-inch strips out of. And as you can see, there's plenty left to do the backing of my quilt, which will also become the liner on the inside. Now you can see how flat those seams are laying down there. So there's no need to put any filler in there. So I'm just going to rough cut an area around that quilted piece there. Well, I guess it's not really quilted yet, it's partially quilted. Anyway, I'll just do a rough cut and then I'll trim it later on after the quilting is done. We still have the machine quilting to do on this, but it's not going to take a long time. And I'll show you what I have in mind for that. Now, if you were doing a quilt as you go quilt, you would probably want to spray some of the temporary adhesive between your batting and your backing. But since my batting is already attached to my top, all I did was put a few pins in there and it worked out just fine. Now all you see me doing here is stitching in the ditch on either side of those narrow strips. With the quilting that has already been done, when I attach those strings to the batting strips, that's all that's going to be needed. So I'm just stitching in the ditch. I'm not breaking thread. When I get to the other side, I'm just pulling the thread out a little bit to allow me to turn it and going right back down the other side of that little strip. I folded my quilt top up just a little bit so that I could get it through that throat space. I do have a 12-inch throat on my jazz machine, so that makes it nice for this kind of a project. Yeah, this kind of quilting is kind of a no-brainer. Not difficult at all. So now we just have to trim that up on all three sides, which we've already done that. And so now we are thinking about the boxed corners. In the last project, I think I did 2 inches square cutouts, but this is a little bit bigger bag, so I'm going to do 2.5 inches on this one. Not sure why I fold it over like that. It's just something I do. Who knows? I'll figure myself out one of these days. Maybe. Alright, so 2.5 inches, and I'll just draw my little lines there so I have something to follow. Okay, so another thing that I'm doing differently this time is I am zigzagging all the way around this whole bag. Remember, there's not going to be a seam on the bottom of this one because I made it one long unit and just folded it over. So even those little cutout places, the 2.5 inch cutouts, will already be zigzagged around before I even square them up to form that box. So yeah, this is takes a little bit extra time, but I think it's worth it because it's easier to do it now than it is after the bag is stitched together. I learned that from my last experience. Okay, we are ready to stitch this baby together. I guess I'm thinking of a baby because that sort of looks like a huge diaper with those cutouts. That's just how my mind works, I guess. Nope, it does. So anyway, I digress. It's early in the morning. So I'm just stitching each side, and I'm only doing about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on that since the sides have already been zigzagged. All right, we are ready to box those corners. I'm kind of opening up that one seam and sticking a little pin there just to reduce that little bit of extra bulk. And I need to put on my walking foot now. I could have had that on when I was quilting, doing that stitch in the ditch, but I really didn't need it then. But now I'll be going through 2 layers of quilted fabric. So yes, I need the walking foot now. And I shortened that process for you. Be glad of that because sometimes it takes me a while to change those feet out. Okay, so I am ready to put those seams in there and see if we can make this look like a bag. So here we go. Now it wouldn't hurt anything to go over those seams a couple of times. I do have my stitch length set pretty low so that those stitches are going to be nice and tight. So I'm not too worried about that. Plus I will have that foam board in the bottom of the bag so there won't be a lot of stress on those. But you know what, I think next time I will do that. Just go over those seams a couple of times. It was kind of an afterthought to me. Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Never hurts to be sure. Okay, that's looking more like it. Let's get it turned the right side out. See what we've got. I love it when I get to this point. You can see what it's going to be shaped like. I'm using my scissors, but they're not real sharp on the bottom, on the tip. Just be gentle. right? I love the way that one connecting strip went right across the bottom, kind of in the middle. Now that's the foam board I'm going to be putting in. But I found out, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I did this, but I discovered that piece of foam board was the same size as the one I put in my first bag, but this bag was a little bit bigger, so it didn't fit really snugly. Snugly, is that a word? Snug. So I wound up making my board a little bit bigger, and I'll talk about that in a minute because right now we're to the handles, aren't we? Okay, so I'm making my handles the same way I made them in the first video. So I took the green fabric and I believe that was about a 1-inch strip of batik that I laid on the top. And I'm just folding that over on each side. So that must have been, let's see, 1 inch, it would have had to be at least 1.5 inches on the green. Maybe even 1 3/4. I would do 1 3/4 or even 2. It won't matter if it's a little bigger. I'm just folding it over one time, clipping it on because that part will not be showing. It will be hid inside the handle. Just want to make sure you have enough to cover the edges of that and stitch them down. Now I found some real pretty butterfly fabric that was left over from another project, and it had a lot of green in it, so I decided to use that kind of just for a little bit of contrast and interest in my bag. So I'm double folding this, so let's see, it just depends on, you need a 1/2 inch on each side, so whatever your batting strip unit is, you need it to be an inch larger so that you can fold those little edges under and stitch them down. I love the way it makes it kind of like a little two-tone handle where you've got the outer color and then you've got a different color kind of on the inside of the handle there. And I hate turning tubes right side out, so I try to avoid doing that. All right, so I had one handle made already, save a little time. Plus I needed to practice. Alright, so I think I measured 4 inches on either end. Came in 4 inches for the outer part of the handle. And then I will just attach those like I did in the last video. The neat thing about this is the edges have already been zigzagged on that, so I don't have to worry about raveling or anything like that as I'm stitching this. And I'm just going around about 1/4 of an inch. Don't worry about those handles coming loose because they will have 2 more sets of stitching going around them. So they'll be stitched 3 times. And I didn't have to measure that one because I just lined it up with the other handle. Okay, handles are attached. Now we have to make the facing. So I'm using that butterfly fabric again. Now I'm just measuring this with the inside of that bag so that I can be sure and get a good fit. I'm just leaving enough for the seam. I'll just stitch that. And then I'm just going to take and fold it in half. Right sides facing out. Okay, now I just need to lay that on the outside of the handles and on the outside of the bag with the raw edges of the facing going up toward the zigzagged edges. I'll match the handles up first and then I'll do the rest of it. And it looks like I guesstimated pretty well on the size. Oops. See, those parts aren't zigzagged. Maybe I should have done that too on the facing. Make sure that underneath part is out of the way. Okay, we are ready to turn that facing, roll it in. Be sure you kind of pull those handles out as you're going. Just going to fold it under and clip it again. Yeah, I like to put a clip on each side of each one of those handles. Make sure we hold that in good. You might think of an easier way to do this. This is just the way that I came up with to do it. And of course, everything is all scrappy, so sizes are optional depending on what you have to work with. Everything can be adjusted. That's the great thing about Scrappy. Everything is negotiable. Can you tell loose threads bother me? They do. Alright, so I'm going to line this up just on the edge of that facing, stitch it down, and then you'll see me in a minute. I'm going to come back and put one more row of stitching in between that seam and the top. Well, we are almost to the end, folks. I think those handles turned out really nice. Really cute. I love the butterflies. Alright, we're back to the foam board. So anyway, I cut out another piece of foam board that was 1/2 inch longer and 1/2 inch wider. So for this bag, it was 6 inches by 12.5 inches. The one I made in the last video was 5.5 inches by 12 inches. So yeah, a 1/2 inch bigger both ways. So butterfly fabric again, and then some of another kind of green that I found a bigger piece of. I didn't have enough left of the one that I made the liner out of. Quarter-inch seam on each side. So to cut this out, I just laid out my foam board and added enough on each side for the seams. And of course I stitched that piece of batting to the butterfly fabric because that is the one that's going to be facing up inside the bag. So yeah, depending on how big you box your corners on the bottom of your bag, you need to measure that and make your foam board to where it has a really snug fit in there. And I'm just going to fold that under and then hand stitch it down, I guess. So I'll just get that ready, clip it down, and then I think I just hand stitched that offline. I mean off camera. I think. Yes, I did. And there's our bag all finished. I wasn't sure how I feel about the green, but I really love it. It's just so cute. And look how many scraps I got rid of. Well, thanks for joining me today. Thanks for being patient. And I have one more strip bag or string bag that I would like to show you how I made. So I'll be coming out with that one soon. The next one will have a diagonal design to it. So happy quilting, and if y'all haven't subscribed to my channel, please do. Thank you so much.